Hi there, and welcome to another very special episode, a very special conversation with very close friend of mine, someone that I've known for many years, and we've worked with each other, we've collaborated with each other, we know each other professionally and personally, and he is a wealth of wisdom and insight, but also such a gentle, supportive, caring energy. So there's so much goodness in this conversation where we talk with John Monks, who is a mindset expert, leadership coach. He helps individuals bridge the gap between where they are and where they want to be. He is a creative soul. He is a fun person to be around. And in this conversation, we touch on so many things. We talk about mindset. We talk about changing habits. We talk about feeling enough and bringing more enoughness into the world. We talk about team dynamics and workshops and achieving goals and communication and intercultural communication and so much more. So this is a very heartwarming, very relaxed, but also deeply meaningful, especially for me, conversation. So I invite you to grab a cuppa, sit down, and join us.
But before we get into this beautiful conversation about trust and vulnerability and all sorts of beautiful, juicy topics, this is your reminder. Hit that subscribe button. Share this video, please, with as many people as you can, because there's some really powerful tools in this video. So hit that subscribe button, share, and like this video. And now let's get back into this wonderful, awe-inspiring conversation.
Hi, John. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Lenka. It's really lovely to see you. I'm so excited to be here.
Always a pleasure to talk to you. So, for our listeners, this will be probably a slightly not different conversation, but different conversation. Me and John, we know each other really, really, really well. We've spent years of collaborating and working and friending each other. And we know each other from professional and personal lives quite well. But when I was thinking about this conversation, what we're going to talk about, I'm like, I know what John does. I know what kind of a person John is. But if I need to describe you to someone else, what are you doing? What is it that, what is the essence of what you bring to the table? I would be struggling to put it all into a description because you do so many things and you've evolved over the years to do so many things, and there are certain values and similarities across. But I definitely would not have an easy job describing you. So
Hmm.
I'll put this job onto you. How do you describe yourself right now? Who is John at this point in history?
Yeah, that is such a good question, Lenka. And I think that in part, it is a little bit of this, it's kind of a modern condition that lots of people, I know you two in particular, like you do lots of things and that's great. And so I think the simplest answer to that question is I help people to be what they can be. So I'm a coach. I help people to get out of their own way. I don't I almost never coach individuals. So like it's a mindset I think is super important that how do you help people to help themselves? Um, and what I really love is working with teams because I think when individuals in teams get out of their own way, huge change can happen. So I think that's really important. And I was thinking about this conversation as well ahead of now. And I was thinking the mantra that's kind of stuck with me through all of the different chapters of John and the concurrent different chapters that are going on right now is this idea of we are enough, which I know, Lenka, you and I have spoken about a number of times, but it's kind of my mantra. It was the strap line of the company that I ran for the last 10 years, which was a team coaching and facilitation company. And the idea behind it was each one of us individually, like we have what we need, like we're capable, resourceful, competent individuals. Like any given team, like they have what they need, same, resourceful, innovative, energetic. And most excitingly for me, I feel like that's true of society as well. And I think that's something that it's really important to hold on to, especially at times like now when the outside world can feel like bleak and depressing and scary. Just holding that confidence that you put a whole load of people who individually are enough together, and we, humanity, we're enough. Like we can solve all this. So kind of positive, um, optimistic outlook.
I love that. And it really feels like it is you, you know, this perspective. Because when I think about, again, the times we spent together for our listeners, we've met when you were founding a co-working space and I got involved. I was co-running the co-working space. I've been, exposed to lots of your kind of coaching techniques. So not necessarily being, a client and being coached, but you brought into the environment, you brought so many different tools. I remember always the intention settings. I loved those. Obviously mindfulness and mindful walks, but also a little bit of creativity and having fun and reframing, rethinking, like looking at things from a different perspective. And I know journaling is a big part of also your processes. So there is a lot of wonderful tools that you have in your toolkit, but I love how you've wrapped it up into this kind of enoughness, because we do live in a world where if I work in social media and social media is perfect on making you feel you're not enough.
Mm.
And I would love to then get your perspective on how do you handle the balance of the world has tendency to tell us we're not enough. The media, the social media, the people around us, this is on a societal level often a big tendency of feeling we're not enough, we're behind, we're lacking. How do you
Mm.
then bring in the enoughness in you,
Mm.
in your friends and family, your clients and colleagues, and how can we bring more enoughness into the world?
I think that's great as well. What a question. I think if I just think about me personally, like to start from me outwards, um, one thing which I picked up from somewhere, maybe you, Lenka, some wise individual in 2021 or 2020 when the news cycle was terrifying. And I remember someone saying, "Oh, you could just black out, have a news blackout, just switch it off. You don't need it, and nothing's going to change. You can't control it." Um, I love, to throw in a tool. One of my favorite tools is this circles of control. There are things you can control, there are things you can influence, and there are things that you can't control or influence. And you should spend as little time as possible in that outer world. And that outer world is the news and social media largely. So from that point on, one of my most important things was I literally don't see the news. So I've blacked it out and I never looked back. I realized what a pointless and energy, motivation sapping thing it was when there's almost never a single thing you could possibly do about anything that you hear. So there's a kind of comic moment that happens here in my house when the kids are around, who, as you know, are both adults, but I have the radio on a lot and here the news comes on like every hour on the hour. And so I have to shout at, I won't say the name of the speaker because she's sitting behind me. Stop, so that stops. So I think one of the ways has been to take care of my own emotional state, and one of those is to kind of control the input. So I now go out if I feel like I want to know what's going on in the world. I go to a news website that I trust. I read it, I close it, I move on. So I think that has been a really big one, and that has stuck, and I can't see it changing. Um, and you talked a lot about journaling. That's probably, if I were to say, like the single most powerful tool for me has been that practice. And again, I can't think when I picked it up. I've tried to track back to when that started, but some point after the year 2000, some point around then. And it's morphed over time. It's not always been the same thing. Sometimes it's been narrative, sometimes it's just been to-do lists, but having a having a a look, hadn't even realized. There we go. It still travels around with me that we are enough. I was just showing my notebook, which had that sticker on the front of it. So, um, using that as a place for self-reflection and taking the thoughts out of my head and trying to get a different perspective on it. Because my observation is that for everybody, I'm sure, but certainly for me, the danger zone is where you get trapped in a cycle of scarcity, and that's an internal loop, and that can drag you down. So the page is a great place to put these things. You can separate yourself from it. I separate myself from it, look at it. Sometimes I reframe it. That's a tool you've talked about, Lenko. I really love that because it just gives a different perspective. So for me, if there were the two big things, one is control my own inputs as far as I can. I don't do social media really at all, apart from LinkedIn. That's the other one, and journal.
And, it's great to get your kind of current summary and perspective on how journaling comes into place and how you use it. Because, yeah, as I'm thinking about the, process of finding the enoughness in us, it comes down to a lot of awareness, like to be aware of who you are and count your blessings and gratitude and figure out that we are enough. But then there is a step that is a choice, like feeling as we are enough, I am enough, this world is enough, my job is enough, is a choice. And it's something that people don't like to hear, is the fact that it's in their power to choose to be enough. And they're like, no, 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 no. There's like the external factors. There's the other people. There's the circumstances. There's so many things. It's not my choice. Like it's
Mm,
like I don't have a choice. Yet,
mm, mm. Yeah, we do. We have a lot of choices, and I am also very, empathetic towards people who may find themselves in a place where, their mental situation or their personal circumstances or whatever makes that choice really hard. And so, I love the mention of gratitude, Lenka. That's another little book I have next to my bed, and I write something in it every day, more or less, unless I go away. And again, it's a habit, and really well proven now, in neuroscience and psychology, that practicing gratitude improves your state of mind and your mood. And yeah, I completely agree. You can choose. I mean, I didn't directly answer the what do I do question, Lenka, because in part the what I do with my life mainly is I run workshops. So I talk about groups, but I love working with groups of people together. And the reason for that, to tie it back to the enoughness, is that often that feeling of, yes, we are enough, happens in those moments of connection with another human being. So all of that, everything that you can do individually, that's great. We should do whatever we can. And the real sense of um, what the possibility is for humanity and for teams of people who are trying to do a good thing in the world, which everybody is in their own way, uh, comes when people connect. And I think the place where there's fragility is when people are isolated. And I see that in organizations, I see it in teams, I see it in individuals, and it was one of the big reasons, to link it to our time at Cambridge Space, Lenka. That was one of the reasons that we set that up, was because people needed, freelancers and solo entrepreneurs needed connection, and it wasn't just a place to work with Wi-Fi. That wasn't really what people were there for. They were there to feel like they were part of a community, that community was there for them, and and it was amazing, and is amazing, I think, always when a group comes together with some sense of common purpose, that they start to create their own resilience and build their own patterns. So
I'm loving where this conversation is going. We've just thrown in, we've talked journaling and gratitude, and just right from the beginning. But you mentioned groups and teams. Now, when you say groups, is it people choose to come to your workshops, or is it through a business and you helping teams within a business to work together, or do you do a combination of both? I mean, I know you've spoken about this co-working space and solopreneurs, But when you mention the word teams, I in my head go straight to businesses, and you
Yeah.
put, Joe Blogs and, Samantha Smiths together, and it's like, you are going to create this project. You are now a team.
Yeah.
Do you work with those as well? And if you do, how do you deal with teams? Because it's one thing when people voluntarily work together because they sort of maybe know each other, but when it's like and you are going to do this project because you are qualified for it, not everybody always gets on, and not everybody likes to work in teams. I'm talking about
Mm.
myself here. If you put me in a team, it's like, send me to hell rather. But the thing is, I know that sometimes you have to work in a team. How do you work with and get people who don't necessarily know each other or like each other to
Mm.
be able to work together in a way that doesn't is not stressful and overwhelming, and it can all they can work together?
So I work in a few different forms. The one that I do least is the a random assortment of people come together and do a workshop together. That very occasionally I'll put a workshop on LinkedIn. Like we did a word for the year workshop back in January. Anybody could come to that. So I won't talk about that because it's not really what you were talking about. There are two different types, I think. One is a group of people who might have a shared objective, who are coming together, but they aren't a team. So, for example, I have a workshop coming up tomorrow. It's about establishing a network of youth service providers, so a mixture of social enterprises and little voluntary groups here in Cambridge. They all are doing amazing work, and what we want to do is kind of create some cohesion and make sure they're not duplicating what each other do and spot where the gaps are. So for that kind of workshop, it's bringing those people together, creating a level of understanding and some kind of a shared language, because often they'll come and they don't really know what one another are doing. So, there's some real, practicalities of workshop design and delivery, which I have been doing. I've run thousands of workshops. I've written a book on running workshops called Closer Apart, which was about online workshops because it was a 2021 publication when that was the thing. But I think there are certain pieces of really quite mechanical exercises and sequencing which enable people to feel comfortable and safe, because I think that's really important, in order that they can then get into some kind of sharing and normally a kind of co-creation. So something that they build together. When when we're planning workshops, and I say we, talking about Curve, the company that I ran, but my collaborators and I, we think about what outcome do we want to happen? So how do we want people to feel and, think as they leave? And what output? So what, do they want to create something? Like, do they want to have a team charter or a vision or something else? And there's normally a balance of those two things, but often people will who don't do a lot of this work will think about the output only. So they'll think about, oh, this is what we need to create, and we'll get people together and we'll try and write this list of things. And in reality, often it's the outcome that is the most important thing. So if I think about this workshop tomorrow, we are going to come up with a charter for how this group of voluntary groups operate. And the more important thing is probably they feel excited, they're aligned, they're all cheering each other on. That's probably the most important thing. So getting clear from the start, what does success look like at the other end? Then, there's so many things you can do to create a really well-designed workshop. There are loads of books out there. AI could give you a ton of things in a split second. So I think often people don't really they don't know what to do, and it's new because for most people, a workshop is something you run occasionally. For some people, it's never. For a very few people, they're running workshops, maybe once a week, once every couple of weeks. But very, very rarely do you see people for whom that's all they do. Um, but then to take it to your specific question about teams, because I think that is a different dynamic. It's a day in, day out relationship where the dynamic within the team is often the biggest thing about the performance of that team. So I have seen so many organizations where the a dysfunction within the leadership team, and I'm typically working with leadership teams, that's normally who brings me in, is dragging everyone down. And I mean, I'm not exaggerating to say that sometimes 60, 70% of their conversation, maybe even more, talks about the team dysfunction. And so little time thinking about actually what they do and who their customers are and what the purpose of the business is. So in an astoundingly large number of cases, that consumes all the time and energy and normally is contributing to those well-meaning individuals going home at night being stressed out, you know, feeling burnout, not being able to give enough to their family, and that cycle of guilt that comes. The so I think it's a really, really important area that deserves an awful lot of attention. and um, and I think that often people feel like where they are is as good as it can be. So they feel like this is true of individuals and of teams. But my the way I like to describe that relationship is, you know, an individual who gets twice as good, you know, twice as good. A team of 10 people where each individual gets twice as good, that's a squared, you know, that's not twice as good. That's, you know, the maths fails me, but hundreds of times as good. And I know that's the case. I've seen it. And typically teams massively underestimate what they could do because they have a current state that they've often been in for years. Nobody feels like they can change it and they can get stuck. So the the first the first step for that is create exactly the same as with the group that aren't a team. They need to feel safe. And I think that's the starting point for any of this kind of work is creating that sense of I'm not going to get shot down if I don't say the right thing, or I'm not going to look stupid, or you know that I can contribute in a way that's going to be creative. So we we design, you know, and I'll get a sense. I'll always have pre-calls with teams so that I understand where they're coming from. Sometimes, you know, they're great. They don't need much. Normally, I'll get a sense of like how much do we need to do to to create safety. And let me give you an example of one of my favorite exercises that I do with leadership teams, which is called personal timelines. And personal timelines is an exercise where everybody gets some time to write on a piece of paper their life journey. And I'll give them 5 minutes. They'll put, you know, when they were born, today, and they'll put in various different things. And almost always people will say, "Oh, yeah, yeah, we can do that exercise. Like, it's fine. We're a trusting team. Uh, Anything is fine." This will normally come from, you know, the chief exec who will who will think that that's the case, probably genuinely. Um, but if I do that exercise when the trust isn't there, and quite often my work might be a 2 day offsite, and people will say, "Yeah, well, let's start with that. You know, let's start with that because that's a good way to get to know each other." And I often have to push back on that because I know, because I've done it hundreds of times, that if the trust isn't there, what you will get is like somebody reading out their LinkedIn profile. You know, it'll be like, I went to school and then I got a job at BT and then I did a secondment at, you know, such and such a company. And then I got married. That might be like the single piece of emotional information. And now I joined this team and I'm super excited to be here. Literally nothing personal shared, no trust built by that exercise, which is a trust building exercise. But if I have done the work, which I do in other ways, to get to the point where there is some trust in the room, then those kinds of stories will start to include things which are genuinely deeply personal. And I will often can feel tingling in my scalp right now thinking about it. People will share really traumatic events or big highs and lows, things that they probably don't share even with their close friends. And that really builds a team. That sense of we know the hard things that we've been through creates a sense of togetherness, which which can propel you forward into doing way better work. So, not sure I answered the question you asked, Natalie, because I went talking around lots of things. But I did, and just to go back to the you in particular. I mean, there are some people who love to work solo. Like, I love to work solo as well. Like, I really enjoy that. I love working with teams, and I love leaving them at the end of my 2 days. And then there are also people who love, or being a part of an organization. And my thought about that is that's all great. And the biggest problem is when you've got, the square hole round peg problem of, you trying to work in a big corporation or it works the same way as well. Like, I've seen a lot of people who've had careers in corporate and then decide to try and go and be a freelancer and really struggle because it's such a different world.
No, I'm very much a round peg in a square hole. It just never fitted, or whether I was the square hole and they were round pegs, it just never fitted. But I do get that people do like to work in teams, and that's why I asked the question, because my experience is I've always been put into teams and as be a team player and just be part of it. But when you were talking about that exercise and that trust, I was just looking back on all the times I had to be part of a team or whatever. Yeah, that trust is not there, and nobody's ever. They should have called you to come in and help. But I get how important this exercise is, because if you don't trust your colleagues, how are you going to put forward an idea or a thought or want to be part of something when you just, well, I would just sit there and think, oh, it's the day over. It's time to go home and I'm done, and just stressing. So thank you very much for sharing that and really bringing that in, because I think that is something I've not ever heard of before. And it's, actually building trust within a teams. I've heard a lot of trying to understand the different personalities, and I know you used to get this color book. I think it was red, green, blue, and purple personalities. And how do you, as a facilitator, work out these different personalities? And it's like, how do you work it out? But that is such a basic thing, because you don't have to really do anything. You're giving them a piece of paper and a pencil and essentially saying, write down your timeline, and you can then see what you're getting and what you're not. You don't have to try and work out, is somebody a red or a green or blue? And I can't remember what the name of this book was. It had a puzzle piece on it with all the
Yeah.
colors.
Yeah.
And the different personalities. I mean, there's hundreds of different varieties of these books, but it's basically you got to walk into a room and straight away spot the different personalities. And I mean, Lenka knows I'm an extreme introvert, but if you put me in with people don't believe that I'm an introvert, because I can very much appear as an extrovert. So how are you going to know I'm an introvert when I'm like being all extroverted and using up way too much energy? So thank you for that. It's really got me thinking and trying to understand teams. I still wouldn't work with teams, but I get it. And it's a valuable tool, that this lifeline thing. It sounds like it's helped a lot of people, but it is, like you said, trust is so important. Trust is, if you don't trust who you're working with, or in any situation, whether it's family, friends, colleagues, anywhere, if you don't have that trust, how can you have that communication? How can you have that balance and that openness, which trust enables you to be honest or open, even if it is a matter of putting up your hand and saying, you know what, I've got an idea. If you don't trust the people you're with, you just stum. You're not going to say anything. So thank you for sharing that and sharing your experiences and how you do it, because it is a big thing. So just because we've been talking about trust and you brought it up, I'll blame you. How's that? You brought it up. How can, with all the people you've been working with, how can people help themselves to create trust in their lives, or maybe even find ways that they can become more trustworthy? That's not the right word, and I appreciate that's not the right word, but if you are in a situation and you feeling that there's something there, how can you, I don't know how to describe it, and I hope you sort of getting where I'm going with this, but how can you get somebody to trust you, or offer that space that somebody can trust you, or even how can you start to create a trust, whether you're in a relationship or as a solopreneur with clients or just in a working environment or whatever? How can you start to create that trust?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think it is. It's probably one of the biggest questions in, you know, being human, isn't it? Because doing any two people doing anything together requires some trust. And you can see, in the world around us, what the lack of trust creates at a global scale. Like it's pretty horrific what can happen. And if you bring it just closer to home, the where that kind of trust exists, it's where joyful communities exist. It's where good stuff gets done. It's where people come home from work feeling like I got stuff done, as opposed to like I spent all day in meetings and I don't feel like I've got anywhere. I've still got all my work to do. Have you ever heard that before? Of like, I spent my whole day at work and I get home and I still have to do the work. I hear it so often. Like, one of the challenges I think of corporate life. The I'm sure you both know Brené Brown, who has done such amazing work over a huge career, and I just think she is absolutely awesome. But some of her early work in vulnerability, really where the whole thing started for her, and everything has built on top of that, is that the way in which trust is created is through some level of personal risk that you take to show that you are able to be vulnerable. That's the way in which trust is created. So I think there's this idea that maybe like an insight is not the same as a feeling. So somebody saying, vulnerability is the key to trust and putting it on a slide and saying at a team meeting, now I'm going to be very vulnerable and I'd like you to be vulnerable as well. And I can imagine, Natalie, inside your head, you're like, I'm not going to say a thing. And I can see that. It's like, yep, nope. Because what people will often see is, I've been here for X years, I've seen people try and be vulnerable, and what's happened to them has not been good. And so I'm not going to do that. So I think that is the key. Like that's the key to trust is vulnerability being shown and showed that the consequences are good. Like so that at its simplest form, that's how you create trust. And I think the mechanic for that is often start small. Like so don't start with you know now I'm going to ask everyone to share their most traumatic childhood memory. Like, let's go around the circle and share. Come on. Or what was your biggest failure at work? Share. I think that those things may come from a place of good intention, but the reality is you have to start somewhere. In reality, anybody can start that. I'm a firm believer that everybody can be the leader, like everybody can be the person leading by example. And that can come in even in organizational teams. It doesn't have to be the boss. It often isn't helpful. It can be started by somebody else. but beginning with something where that happens and the consequences are positive, and that happens time and time and time again, and that's how you shift a culture to being a culture of trust. And I think it's tied very much then to in organizations and in teams trying to do something together. So this could be a community group or it could be a volunteer organization, anywhere where people are trying to together achieve something. The really important thing that trust allows you to do is communicate really clearly and give really good, direct, caring feedback that you know is not going to hurt somebody. So that, if there's one of my top topics, if I have a topic, is this idea of feedback. So once you have the trust, you can be giving feedback really directly. And I have seen teams where they're so good at giving and receiving feedback. It's so unemotional. It's very simple. It's like dealing with a whole load of Dutch people. It's like, I'm not taking it personally. I'm just going to tell you how it is. But in England, that's not how we work. Everyone would be crying at the end of it. So I think you enable people to try something, get feedback, try it again, and so you get you just get further faster. It's exciting when you're moving at pace. So that is the case it'd be the same in a relationship. It's the same in a family. And I've got two kids and I'm an expert in this kind of mindset, and I know that it isn't always easy.
You touched on something that also is quite interesting to explore, I think, and it's the multicultural nature of our lives. And again, it could be in a workplace, it could be in professional relationships, it can be in networking, in relationships, dating, friendships, creation, co-creation, where, as simple as within Europe, we have such a vast, distinct types of personalities and mentalities that can be a bit based more on the culture. And I always say the example of my friend traveling, my Czech friend traveling with me around UK and looking at me one day and say, "You're such a nicer person when you speak English." The language playing such an essential part of, like, it's not like I'm a different person, but the culture, the language, the nature of the environment I'm in kind of rubbed on me, where she immediately was like, "You're a very different person when you speak in English." Versus then you have someone in a team who comes, and again had a client who's telling me that they have hired me especially because I am from Czech Republic, Eastern Europe, that I have certain amount of directness, and they were always like, "We chose you because we're afraid of you, because we want this little bit of the, gentle encouragement." So obviously, I want to know how you approach this, working with different people of different cultures and nationalities. How do you approach it? What have you learned along the way of, getting the best out of people who on paper may have by default big differences because of their background and their upbringing?
I think it's such a fascinating topic, and I'm really aware, like I know so little about it. And I hadn't really thought about this until literally right now, Lenka, with this question. So I always work in English. I don't speak another language fluently enough to be able to facilitate in it. So everybody that I work with is either an English language first speaker, or they're like you, they are fluent in English, but it's not their first language. So and that's actually a very large number of my clients actually are in that second camp, because it's often in European organizations where English is the language of business. So they're having to work in that. I think, I think just one observation on that, I'm always very careful of that because I'm aware of just how much extra mental load that places on those people, because they're having to also, if they're not constantly speaking English, they're having to translate in their head. So just thinking really practically about a workshop, which can be quite a draining experience for anybody, being aware that for people that are having to live translate the whole time and think about what something means in another language, it's exhausting.
And then you bring it even within English, for a foreigner, you bring in the accents. It's not only that you speak in English, but if you're one or two or three kind of foreigners coming into a British language mix, you're like, what the hell are you people even speaking English? That was my experience.
Yeah. And so, like, if I'm only thinking about the mechanics of it, I just have to slow down. So, that's kind of it. I'm a big I'm a big fan of using visualization, so kind of sketching as a way to get to ideas, so that you can take. I mean, first of all, it's fun. Second, the visuals span languages, and it can be a lot easier for people to work like that. And also, people have a habit of kind of like, and this is not, they're not trying to be difficult, but their language invites trying to clarify. No, that's not quite what I meant. I kind of meant this, and no, that's not quite right. I wouldn't use this word. I'd use that word. Whereas a visual, typically everyone will look at it and go, yeah, that's about it. So I think, especially, one of the things I'm often asked to do is facilitate a visioning workshop. And I try to make that as literal as it can be. It's a vision. So we're going to try and sketch some stuff, and that will be the way that you go. Because typically the purpose of doing that is to create alignment. It's not because you want some very, and if you do want a beautiful visual thing at the end, then there are illustrators and graphic designers, and they are the people that should do it. So to take it right back to your first question, though, of like cultural difference, I always come from the starting point of beneath the national identities, there's a humanness that exists in everybody, and that so that because I think you can get distracted by the oh, but French people are different to Italian people are different to Japanese people. So I try to understand the culture in order that I'm not gonna upset people. So I'm conscious that maybe there are kind of social norms I want to be aware of, but equally, what we're trying to do is create connection and then get to an outcome. So I'm almost trying to strip away that layer of actually we're different and point us all more towards how we're similar. And in a way, almost then those nationality types can be a little bit more like the personality types that Natalie was talking about. Like, it's great. We've got somebody who's a little bit more reflective, and so they can do this. And we've got this super direct, Czech woman, and she can be our, tell it straight to the boss woman. And, I think you can use all of those things as positive attributes that are just part of everyone being unique. And then the other thing is those national stereotypes are normally part of some much more complicated story about the individual and their family and their neighborhood, and all super interesting, but probably not the thing that in my job as trying to get the team to a certain place, it's not what I need to do.
Honestly, I think there's so much more we could be talking about. I'm looking at the time. I'm like, no, 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 we're coming slowly to the end, and I have so many questions, there's so many areas I know we could cover. So I'm trying to, quickly jump in and maybe bring in one more aspect of your, insights and knowledge and area of expertise. And know that a lot of what you do is also around mindsets, and lots of what we talked about can touch on the kind of
Mhm.
mindset shifts and changes, and also, changing habits. And I would love to kind of get a little bit of your insights on. We talk a lot about change here and bringing in the better of us and creating the feeling of, feeling enough, bringing it full circle. And lots of it will be part of changing habits and changing our mindset. And for me, habits and mindset are interesting, kind of they're aligned and yet they feel slightly different. Like, I'm changing my habit, or am I changing my mindset? Am I actually doing something, or am I just thinking something?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think it's right at the core of what I love to do, and I think that is, if I think about the work with groups, what they're doing is changing their mindset collectively, even if they don't know that that's what they're doing. They're shifting to a more positive, more collaborative mindset. And I I really love the way that you started there with that idea of feeling. So my this this is my knowledge about me, my experience of hundreds and hundreds of clients, and also there's a whole load of research and great books about emotional intelligence. And the first thing to think about is how you feel, because if you try and change the behavior, especially the habit, like I'm just gonna force myself to drink more water, or exercise more, or eat the right things, or stop smoking, that mindset is almost the opposite of helpful. Like you can see people around where that has the opposite effect of what they want. Not, obviously that's not what they intend, but starting with the how you feel, I think is really important. And so I think there's a really base level of how is your body right now. So if you're in a place which is really low mood, and anything feels hard, then trying to change your mindset or habit is the wrong place, and it will actually fail, and then it'll push you further down. So the little things that I know you talk an awful lot about here, getting into nature, having good routines, prioritizing sleep, eating good food, and all of those only need to be little incremental tweaks. No, I would say anything where you feel like you want to revolutionize anything. I want to move my sleep from 5 hours to 8.5, like, or I want to shift from junk food to only eating salad, like, scrap it. Get 10% better, like that's good enough, or 5% or 1%. And just start, I think, so starting with what is it that gives you a solid foundation that allows you to move forward. The second thing I would say to everybody is, in whatever form you like, start to journal. Like, that could be scraps of paper, it could be notes on your phone, it could be a beautiful moleskin with a fancy pen because you really like that. And whatever you do is right. There's no failing. As long as you do something, you're winning, because that allows you to reflect. Even, and it doesn't matter if you ever look back at it, it just pins the current state in a moment. So build the foundations, add some form of journaling, whatever that is. Even if it's as light as every morning I just asked myself the question, how am I feeling? So I think what's the very smallest version of all of these things? And then once you're there, then you can start to think about the mindset. The biggest mindset for me is the growth mindset. So that idea that you can always learn and you can always grow. So spotting in yourself the can't moments and reframing them into learnings and opportunities for growth. Again, not allowing that to become a stick to beat yourself with, because while you could learn everything, you probably shouldn't. So, pick your things, pick the things you want to apply your mindset to. It's okay, yeah, well, I'd love to become more creative, or spend more time in nature, or learn everything about AI. Okay, great, pick your thing. And then the habits thing, I think, is just it's a really useful lens for how do you turn that mindset into something that shifts your life day by day. And I think you've got this because at some point a habit just becomes you, and this can work positively and negatively. But if you put in place a habit that will require some attention for some amount of time, you'll hear lots of magic numbers about how long. But what's true is a habit will at some point cease to need to be thought about. It's a very clumsy way of saying it, but yeah, there's a point at which it's automatic, and it's just become who you are, and that's leveled you up. And then you can think about the next thing. And for me, that whole thing is, this journey of personal growth, exactly what Into Your Life is all about. Like, it's never ending, is it? And that's great. It's like there's always a next thing. So with all of those things, it's like you're just continuing to build, and we're all human. So some days, some things will fall apart. I mean, I'm a very forgetful person, so I will forget things that I've created as a habit, and a month later I'm like, oh yes, that was a really good thing. I should do that again. It's like it's all great.
And I love that we're kind of coming full circle from we talked about the feeling we are enough. And for me, it's been one of the biggest lessons on my personal development journey is to find a balance of allowing two realities and two truths to be true at the same time, which means I am enough right here, right now, as I am, and yet I still want to be better, different, grow tomorrow. And for a long time, it was really hard to get it to sink in. The fact that I have such aspirations of what I want to do, what I want to learn, what I want to achieve, to always feel like, well, I'm only going to be good enough once I'm there, rather than to realize, no, 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 the mindset is right here, right now, we're enough, but that doesn't stop us. It's not like we then settle. It was like, just enough. We don't need to do anything ever again. We're like, we're perfect. We're done. No, it's this interesting balance between kind of knowing who we are and feeling at peace and at ease with that, and yet still have the desire and willingness to do something better for ourselves, better ourselves tomorrow.
Yeah, 100%.
One last point, I'm curious to know, obviously we're talking about then the changes and the habit building and how the mindset plays. What role do you think that self-identity, again, we're going back to maybe the enoughness, but overall our self-identity, our labels come into helping us, guiding us in terms of changing our habits or building new habits or making these steps, or versus then stopping us the mindset of I believe myself to be this and this and this. Because to me, one of the things I often remind myself of in this situation is the whole be, do, have. To have something, we start from who are we being, that leads to something what we're doing, which then ends up what we're having, rather than focusing on, I want to have this. So I have to do, and ultimately I will become the person.
Mm. So that's a really interesting question. I think there's a I forget who created this, but an idea of like identity-based habits, which I think is a really helpful tool for some people, where they basically will say, I'm the kind of person that puts things away." So that they have a goal to be a little bit more organized, and they try and create a leveled up identity, and then they tell that story to themselves. And I think that's very helpful. And I think that one of the things I think about like the identity thing is like how people can get stuck because they can, I just said I'm a very forgetful person only a moment ago, and I know that's not untrue. And at the same time, I also know there's growth possible there. So I think there's uh, there's again a balance, a self-compassionate way of seeing yourself as like, well, it's all in all likelihood, there's something about me that means I'm never going to remember everything like some of my friends do. And equally, I can always be a little bit better in any area. So I think the way I think about identity is it's malleable, it's changeable, it's yours. You have choice, to bring it back to what you said much earlier on in this conversation. Like you get to choose.
One thing on identity is people also can sit in that. It's an excuse. So you've used I'm forgetful sometimes. And that's an identity that you can then use it as an excuse not to do something because, oh, well, I'm a forgetful person. Therefore, just I didn't do it. So I like how you said we can choose to step up from that and find ways to work around it instead of settling on an identity and using it as an excuse or a reason not to do something or
Mhm.
react a certain way. So thank you for bringing in a different perspective on identity. So thank you for that. So this is our what we call the gold nuggets. So this is where we ask John, may we please have your gold nuggets?
So my gold nugget I've talked about twice already in this conversation, so I'm going to say it again because repetition really helps. is is journaling. I do think it is the foundational mindset tool. I think it's something which It's probably what's enabled humanity to progress to where it is now. And it is the thing. If I think about all of the most successful people I've ever worked with, every single one of them journals in some way. And yet, I would say 4 out of 5 people don't. My finger in the air statistic there. So I think my golden nugget would be it isn't any one thing, it can be whatever you like. And it is the habitual uh, act of taking your thoughts and putting them down onto paper. I would suggest paper rather than digital, but if that's the barrier, then onto your phone because we all have it with us all of the time.
Thank you so much for that gold nugget. And like you said, repetition is so important. And sometimes we need to hear things 3 times for it to go in. So this third time is probably that gold nugget that's gone in. So thank you very much for sharing that and reminding us that journaling is important. And you can journal in so many different ways, as you shared. And there's, of course, many books on how to journal and journal questions. So just get that pen and paper, and I'm with you, pen and paper. That's the way I like to do it. So for our listeners, if they're wanting to get in contact with you, find out more about what it is that you do, how you do your workshops, or what workshops you're doing, or how you work with teams, or just want to be in your circle somehow, where can people find you?
Yeah. So my website is johnmonks.co.uk. Very simple. It's the my name. And you can find me on LinkedIn, John Monks Curve on LinkedIn. So they'd be the two places to find me.
And obviously, we will add those links in the description below so people can just click and find out more about you. So thank you so much for being here today, John. And I knew this was going to be a wonderful conversation, not disappointed at all. I've learned so much from today's conversation again, and you reminded me of things that I kind of knew. And again, it's great to get a reminder. But we're greedy at this podcast, and we always want to squeeze in a little bit more of our guests. And at the end, I'm always reminding us and our listeners that this podcast is about finding ways to have happier, healthier, and more fulfilling lives, to lean more into our lives. I was curious, like right now, what gives you life?
Hmm. I think right now it is my community at the gym. It is the combination of routine, connection, friendship, and physical exercise. So it's kind of wrapped a load of great stuff all up into, and we go and have coffee afterwards. So plus coffee.
Love it. I love it. And like you said, wrapping all of that in together. So it sounds like fun, especially the coffee afterwards. That's why you go to gym, for that extra cup of coffee and hopefully cake sometimes.
For sure.
So thank you so much for sharing your time with us today, and your energy and your wisdom and guidance and reminders as well, because what you said is not necessarily new, but it's your perspective, and it's been really nice to hear it from your perspective and the reminder, especially about the journaling. So thank you so much for sharing your energy, and you've been very energetic, and anybody who watches this video will see the energy oozing out of you, is the only word I can come with. So thank you so much for that. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
And for our listeners, what have you got from today? What nuggets or wisdom have you picked up? Is it the journaling? Is it the self-identity? Is it about trust and vulnerability? We would love to know, what aha moments have you got from this conversation? And do you work with any of these ideas? And especially, have you read Brené Brown? I mean, Lenka and I love that. So we'd love to know your thoughts. So share with us. And until next time, we'll talk to you soon. Bye.